Okay, back in the Gospel of Mark. We are in the end of chapter 4 and then going into chapter 5. And this is going to be part 1 of the power of the King. The reason I'm breaking and calling this part 1 is because in the end of 4 and then all of 5, we have the presentation of 4 miracles. And each one of them distinct, and each one of them in a unique area of life. Jesus is going to demonstrate power over nature, over demons, over illness, and death. And these are truly the 4 categories of any and all miracles, and any and all power, and any and all needs that we have. Now, in my youth, when I was preaching, whenever I'd come to miracles of Jesus, or any miracles for that matter, I would always fall back on this phrase, miracles authenticate the messenger. I've said that 10,000 times probably in my life, and trying to explain miracles to people. But that's what I did when I was young, and I've gotten older, a little bit older, not as old as some of you, but I was a young pup in the room. But as I've gotten older, I've realized there's so much more to miracles than just authenticating the messenger. Now, the authentication of the messenger is important. How do we know he came from God? Well, he raised people from the dead. He demonstrated power over nature. He can do all these things. And it's important in that regard. But there is so much more. And I think about these 4 categories. That Jesus has sovereign control over all of nature. And all of the natural world. Now that's going to encompass a lot of things in our lives. I would even put finances in that. Why do finances belong in the natural world? Well, that's where they exist. Remember when Peter got Jesus hooked on, well, we got to pay our taxes now. What did Jesus do? He did a miracle. And automatically there was money in his bank account? No, he said, go and catch a fish and then look in the fish's mouth. And there was a coin there for Peter's temple tax and one for Jesus' tax. And sovereignty over the natural world. So Jesus is over the natural world. He works miracles there. He's also over the supernatural world. We've already seen him cast out demons. We're going to see another one in this next chapter and a half. We're going to see him do that again. Why is that important? Well, because so much of what is important in this life comes down to the supernatural. When Jesus forgives sins, that's in the supernatural. You can't see that happening, but it happens nonetheless. The accounting books of heaven are wiped clean by his forgiveness. That's supernatural. And believe me, we all need a miracle in that regard. Illness. Illness is one of the most profound ways most people will ever realize their deep need for God, because of the pain involved, the suffering. By its very nature, it gets our attention. And of course, death. Death being the capstone of all these things. There's no coming back from death unless you're God. Unless you have authority over death, hell, and the grave, which Jesus does. So these 4 categories. So, yes, they authenticate who Jesus is, and they lift him up, and that his power is supreme. But also, I want you to think about yourself. What needs have you ever had that Jesus is not able to take care of? In fact, more than that, there's not the guarantee that he's not the genie in a lamp and you're going to rub and get you 3 wishes. He doesn't do magic tricks. But isn't it good to know that he is over all things? Why is that good to know? Because it eliminates the need or the place of fear. Most people, when we have a crisis, say an illness, say a serious illness, what's the first thing we think of? Am I going to make it? Am I going to be able to pay for my treatment? Are people going to stick with me? Am I going to die alone? And all these crazy fears can fill our heart. Is this going to linger on? Is this going to be my suffering until I'm dead? And all this fear builds. Well, the opposite of fear is not courage. The opposite of fear is faith. So knowing that God is in control, knowing that he can answer any prayer. Now again, not a genie. Doesn't mean he's going to answer it your way, but that you can trust him. And he's never given you any reason to not trust him. Remember when I like to call them by their Hebrew names, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, but nobody ever knows who I'm talking about. So we say Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those are the names given to them by the Babylonians. That's why I like to say Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. When they were thrown in, they wouldn't bow the knee, and they were thrown into the fiery furnace. And before he throws them into the fiery furnace, they say, listen, our God is able to deliver us out of the fire. That's faith. Now, real faith is the next thing they said. They said, but even if he doesn't, even if he doesn't, we'll never bow the knee. We will always trust him. We will trust him forever. That's faith. And faith is built on knowing that God is in control. I'm going to silence my phone because I'm not in control of that. There we go. So anyway, that's kind of what I want our takeaway to be. So as we're going through these miracles, think about how that applies in your life and the things that you're going to face. We're going to look at 2 of them tonight. I wanted to do all 4, but I think you guys would leave before I was done. All right. So we're going to look at his power over nature and his power over demons, and that starts. Power over nature starts in chapter 4, verse 35. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, let us go over to the other side. Now again, they're at the Sea of Galilee. The situation hasn't changed. And everything that we've seen in chapter 4 so far, this is all the same really, really, really long day. I mean, this is just one of those days when Jesus just gave it all. And he's dealing with people time and time and time again. He's going and he's going and he's going. And he finally says, let's go to the other side. So they're on the west side of the Sea of Galilee. He says, let's go to the other side. You know what's at the other side? Nothing. There's not many people over there. So I love this verse for this reason. I'm going to tell you a secret I probably shouldn't tell you. Sometimes my wife and I don't do nothing. Sometimes we get our phrase, I'll tell it to her, she'll tell it to me, I'll say, I'm done peopling. That means lock the door, pull the blinds, don't get sucked out by any upes at the gate. Just, duck down, we're done peopling. Jesus was done peopling. He was exhausted. So he says to his disciples, he says, hey, let's go to the other side. I need a break. Need a nice boat ride? Catch me a power nap. We'll get to the other side. We'll have a little bit of rest because these people are wearing me out. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was. Just as he was. It's a weird phrase, but I take it as exhausted. In other words, they're basically, maybe he's leaning on a couple of the disciples. They got his arms draped over their shoulders, and they're kind of walking him down to the boat, and they plop him down in the stern, and there's a cushion there, and he just lays down, just as he was in the boat. Now, there are also other boats with him, so there's several disciples that are going, but it's the ones that have been serving. They're getting away from the larger crowd. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat, so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, Teacher, don't you care if we drown? He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, Quiet, be still. Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? They were terrified and asked each other, Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. This is a favorite painting of mine. This is Christ in the storm of the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt. This was painted in 1633, oil on canvas. It's famous, more famous now than it was for most of its existence. In 1990, I mean, not that long ago, 1990, that was the year we were married, it was stolen from a museum and it's never been found. It was given to us as a wedding gift. It's hanging upstairs. I'm just kidding. Wouldn't that be something? Not his best work, but I like it. It's his only seascape that Rembrandt ever did. I like it because of the theme of it. It captures the storm of it. You see the disciples. There's Jesus kind of being woken up in the stern, and this is what's going on. What's going on? So this is just a beautiful painting. And we'll leave it there as I talk about this episode that just had it. Now, the other synoptic gospels include this story in their telling, but Mark gives the most detail, and he's the only one to record Jesus's words. And I think that's because, remember, Mark is probably drawing from Peter, who was there. So he's got the eyewitness right there, and Peter's going on and on, yeah. And then he gets up and he says, and so that's how Mark is capturing this story. Now, on the Sea of Galilee, I've been on there a couple of times, and the Sea of Galilee is notorious for its sudden storms. It's truly not a sea, it's truly just a lake. But it's deep, and the geography around it is such that the winds will create a vortex over the mountains, and it causes frequent rough storms, and that's where it gets the name, why it was called the Sea of Gennesaret, or the Sea of Galilee, because the waves would form on it like waves of the ocean. Even though it's a lake, when you're on it, you could say, if you couldn't see land, you'd say we're on the ocean. I mean, it can be that rough. So this was not an unusual thing. Also, think about this, how many, at least 4 of the disciples were also fishermen from there. So being on the sea was nothing new to them. So for the disciples collectively to be afraid, this had to be a bad storm. Peter and Andrew weren't running around saying, listen, relax guys, we've been in much worse. That would be in here, especially with Peter telling the story to Mark. That would have been in here. We tried to calm them, but they were inconsolable. It's not in there because this was a rough storm. So Jesus, again, sleeping in the stern, he's asleep. Now think about it. This is a rough storm. Sleep can say different things about us. I like to think about this story as kind of the opposite of Jonah. Jonah was on a hired boat. He had booked passage on to get away from God's will. And Jonah was asleep. But he was asleep because he was spiritually dead inside. He had just a conscience that had rejected God's clear direction. He did not want to go and minister in Nineveh, and he was asleep out of rebellion. Jesus had a pure conscience. I think he was asleep like a baby. But I think more than anything, the fact that he was asleep is meant to convey how exhausted he was. He was tired. My wife hates it. I can sleep anywhere. If you guys just hold it down, I can fall asleep right here, right now. I mean, I can do that. But Jesus, I think, was so truly exhausted that he just needed the rest. But again, it could point to the fact that he was calm because he knew who he was. He knew the power that he had. And that just points to something else about Jesus, his humanity. He sleeps. We call this a sinless imperfection. Okay, hunger is a sinless imperfection. I don't expect to have any hunger tomorrow, and all of it to be satiated. But sleep is a sinless imperfection. There's no sin involved. The fact that our bodies are weak, this is just the state of how our bodies exist. And so Jesus, of course, did sleep. But then he records this rebuke by the disciples, and there's no other way to take it than a rebuke. It was, it says, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Drop the question out of it. Just take the question mark off the end. And, "Teacher, you don't care if we drown?" I mean, that's, when you ask a question, it's the same as saying the statement. I mean, That's why you got to be careful the questions you ask certain people if they're very susceptible to influence. You never ask a child, what are you going to do with that bean? You're not going to stuff that up your nose, are you? You just gave them the idea, right? So here's the disciples. They're not really asking. They're saying, you don't care. We had to wake you up. If you cared about us, you would have been awake saving us. So this is truly a rebuke. But this cry of theirs, this cry of distrust, is no different than when you do it or I do it. And we do it. Let's be honest. Have you ever once in your life, in the hardness of life, and life can be hard sometimes, have you ever wondered, where is God? Where is God in all this? How come God didn't save that person? How come God didn't rescue my business? How come God didn't deliver my child from suffering, from pain, from drugs, whatever? Because when we think we know more than God, we see that God should have done this or that, and he didn't do it. You don't care if we drown. We do this. We need to own it. Because we'll never get it fixed. We'll never move on from it if we don't own it for what it is. It's a lack of faith. Bad stuff's going to happen. You're not promised an easy life. Bad stuff's going to happen. The only question is what happens to you when bad stuff happens. Are you filled with faith? Are you filled with fear? Do you say, I can't wait to see what God is going to do through this? And you can pray about it. You can ask God to intervene, but it's the question of, is there fear present or is there trust? Do you believe that God can handle it? So the disciples should not have been fearful. It's okay they can be concerned. It's okay to say, you know what, it looks like the boat might go over. Good thing is we know Jesus. But they didn't do that. They were afraid. So they end up rebuking the man, the one man that can do something about the problem. What should they have done? I mean, to not be fearful. What would allay their fear? 4 things. Number 1, Jesus said, we're going to the other side. They'd never known him to lie. He can't lie now. So they're either going to the other side or they're not. But if they're not, then he's a liar. Or he's not God. But he said they were going to the other side. Second, he said he would be with them. We're going together to the other side. Now, it's not his time to die. So it's not their time to die. All right? Third, he was sleeping. He was sleeping. You always take your cue from the most mature person, the wisest person. Always take your cue. Who are the leaders in the group? When military figures talked about leaders, he who keeps his head about him when all others are losing theirs. So when you see a stressful situation and something's happening in your town or in your community or your home, and look around and say, who's got their head about them? Who's full of faith? Well, Jesus was so relaxed about this, he was still asleep. They should have taken that as a clue. Fourth, he had already demonstrated his compassion, his care for them. Why did they believe suddenly that had changed? We forget during times of testing the lessons we learned during times of teaching. It tells us that we haven't really learned them. The disciples had already been given plenty of reason to trust in Jesus. They had forgotten it. The next thing we see in this was Jesus' words. And Mark's the only one that records them. Here in the NIV it says, quiet, be still. And looking at these words, they're actually addressed the way you would speak to a child. So it wasn't this kind of Charlton Heston, as Moses screaming out to nature, parting the Red Sea. No, Jesus is so confident in his power over nature. He says, quiet, still, and it obeys. That's power. He didn't have to scream. He didn't have to beg. He didn't have to plead. He just spoke. fact, when you want to know real power, you look at the one who speaks and things happen. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. He didn't scream it. He didn't conjure it up. He spoke. When Jesus speaks, quiet, be still. The wind died, the waves calmed. It's incredible. The sea here is a place of chaos and destruction, and God speaks, and there's calm. That should come to our mind every time we're surrounded by chaos and destruction. I was watching the news and I'm seeing all this in Washington. I'm thinking about my son. I actually said, thank you, God, that when my son has to go into D.C., he's not allowed to wear his uniform. Isn't that something? What? Because I'm afraid? Yeah. Instead, I should be saying, thank you, God, that you have a plan for my son no matter what. I trust you. Trust you. When we see chaos, we need to think of the one who speaks and speaks calmness. So Jesus, then in verse 40, he had this disappointment in his disciples. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? Now, in all fairness, this is early in the ministry. It's not surprising that they haven't fully comprehended who he is. They've bought into the fact that he is the Messiah. They bought into the fact that he is the Son of God. But their understanding of all that means at this point is not fully formed. In fact, it's going to take the entire 3.5 years of walking with him before they really understand it. Until they see him risen from the dead, they're not going to even fully understand it. And so it's still not totally surprising that they kind of missed it. But they shouldn't have, to be honest, because God actually described who he was and who he would be and what he would be capable of long before Jesus ever walked the earth. We'll go back to the Psalms here. Look at this. Psalm 89, verses 8 and 9. Who is like you, Lord God Almighty? You, Lord, are mighty, and your faithfulness surrounds you. You rule over the surging sea. When its waves mount up, you still them. I want to do this. I want to read one more psalm. I want to read the whole thing because it should be one of the ones that we go back to when we are afraid, when we are thinking that if I can go the right direction, get to Psalms. This is a good Thanksgiving psalm too. Maybe a good one to read tomorrow. I want to read it quickly. You'll latch in on the verses that I'm interested in, but I want to read the whole thing. It's a little bit long. Bear with me. This is worth it. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good. His love endures forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say this: those he redeemed from the hand of the foe, those he gathered from the lands, from the east and west, from north and south. Some wandered in desert wastelands, finding no way to a city where they could settle. They were hungry and thirsty, and their lives ebbed away. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he delivered them from their distress. That's my God, right? He led them by a straight way to a city where they could settle. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men. For he satisfies the thirsty and he fills the hungry with good things. Some sat in darkness and the deepest gloom, prisoners suffering in iron chains, for they had rebelled against the words of God and despised the counsel of the Most High. So he subjected them to bitter labor, and they stumbled, and there was no one to help. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He brought them out of darkness and the deepest gloom, and he broke away their chains. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men. For he breaks down gates of bronze and cuts through bars of iron. Some became fools through their rebellious ways and suffered affliction because of their iniquities. They loathed all food and drew near to the gates of death. Then they cried to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He sent forth his word and healed them, and he rescued them from the grave. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men. Let them sacrifice thank offerings and tell of his works with songs of joy. Others, watch this, others went out on the sea in ships. They were merchants on the mighty waters. They saw the works of the Lord, his wonderful deeds in the deep. For he spoke and stirred up a tempest and lifted high the waves. They mounted up to heavens and went down to the depths. In their peril, their courage melted away. They reeled and staggered like drunken men. They were at their wits' end. Then they cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he brought them out of their distress. He stilled the storm to a whisper. The waves of the sea were hushed. They were glad when it grew calm, and he guided them to their desired haven. Let them give thanks to the Lord for his unfailing love and his wonderful deeds for men. Let them exalt him in the assembly of the people and praise him in the council of the elders. He turned rivers into a desert, flowing springs into thirsty ground, and fruitful land into a salt waste because of the wickedness of those who live there. He turned the deserts into pools of water and the parched ground into flowing springs. There he brought the hungry to live, and they founded a city where they could settle. They sowed fields and planted vineyards that yielded a fruitful harvest. He blessed them, and their numbers greatly increased, and he did not let their herds diminish. Then their numbers decreased, and they were humbled by oppression, calamity, and sorrow. He who pours contempt on nobles made them wander in a trackless waste, but he lifted the needy out of their affliction and increased their families like flocks. The upright see and rejoice, but all the wicked shut their mouths. Whoever is wise, let him heed these things and consider the great love of the Lord.
Which one was that?
Psalm 107.
Okay.
It's such a great picture. Obviously, it's talking about Israel and the times when Israel rejected God and things got bad. Then they cried out to the Lord, and he heard and he answered. And then what should they do? What should their response be? To give thanks to the Lord. But that psalm reminds us that he's over all the enemies. He's over all of nature. He's over everything that'll come against us. And he's the one that we come to and give thanks to, because he's the one we cried out to when we saw our troubles. And surely the disciples had heard this in synagogues. Surely they knew the word of the Lord. But to imagine that he was in the boat with them was just too much for him that day. But Jesus has power over nature. Here in Costa Rica, well, we have earthquakes and volcanoes, right? But there's so much more to nature. There's snakes and insects and all manner of things, and dengue and all that. We can either live in fear or we can live in faith. We can trust in God to deliver. We can trust God for our finances. We can trust God for all that is around us, because he has power. The second area he has power is power over demons. And we've already seen him do this, but this story is here, I think, for this particular reason. Chapter 5, verse 1, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. And just to let you know what we're talking about here. Now, he had obviously... They had come from west to east to get away, but then had gone back. But in this next chapter, he's talking about this region here on the west. Now you see Gergesa here and Gadara here. And as you look at the gospel side by side, there seems to be some disagreement. It's actually, it's a good disagreement. Some people look at it and they see an error when actually it's something that we all do. Angela and I went to the city the other day. Now I say that, you know where I went, or do you? Well, the city is San Jose. So happens we really only went to Santa Ana, right? Now if we both wrote stories down and you said, yeah, Steve went to San Jose, and then I wrote a story down that said I went to Santa Ana, would one of us be wrong? No, we'd be right. And this is what happens here. Now, Mark and Luke called this region the region of the Gerasenes. Matthew called it the country of the Gadarenes. Gergesa or Gersa or Cursa, depending on how it's written down, what language it's written down. It has all three names. Is this small village about halfway down, right there. And about midway down. Now, Gadara is a larger town here, down on the southeast corner of the Sea of Galilee. And both of these names are used to describe what happens in this next event. So they're both right, which I take it to mean it happens right around here. And we confirm that by just walking there. And I'm going to show you a photo in a minute, because this is the area that fits the geography that's described in the story. So one author used the town that was closest to the north, the other author used the town that was closest to the south. Tomato, right? All right. Verse 2, when Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. Now, Mark gives more details of the story than either Matthew or Luke did. In fact, Mark seems to focus in on the deliverance from demon possession more than the other authors did. And here he stresses the fact that this guy had this incredible physical strength. There was nobody that could subdue him. Now, the Bible never tells us why this is so. It's descriptive in this way. It doesn't tell us, if someone's possessed by a demon, that they have sudden strength. The Bible never tells us, but in this story, it describes it that way. It doesn't always mean that that's the case. Now, the interesting thing is the way this is described, the way this is written up, that he was kind of living in this wild life. He had this incredible strength. And, more details are going to be given in just a moment. But I've so often heard from people that doubt the Bible, they look at these stories and they say, this was mental illness, and that culture there didn't have an understanding of mental illness, so they describe it as demon possession. And, people can take that view. But let me just throw out another thing to consider. Maybe some of what's called mental illness today is actually demonic possession. Tomato. Right? Because when God is kept from children and adolescents, even middle-aged people, and they're left with nothing in the void of the human soul to give it meaning or purpose or significance or understanding of how the world works, then anything will do to fill that void. We have in the Bible not a technique to describe the the incomprehensible. I don't think that's what these passages about demon possession are. I think they're describing the truth about what is, that this is still something. You say, well, why don't we see more of this in kind of like here in Costa Rica? Why isn't there more demon possession? Or why didn't I see demon-possessed people growing up? Well, two possible answers. Maybe you did, but there's more of a restraint in the culture, because remember, every Christian in the culture is somebody indwelt by the Spirit of God. That's a tremendous restraining influence. The Bible describes at the rapture, when Christians are taken up out of this world, that the restrainer, the Spirit, is gone. And then the earth will know lawlessness like never before. And so when you have a country like Costa Rica where, at least 83% of the people will, in one church or another, they believe in God. And just assume that quite a few of those really do. Well, that's the presence of the Spirit of God in this country. When you travel to countries that don't have that are predominantly not Christian, you see other things. I don't like to share truly subjective spiritual experiences because they're just that. But I will share one here, but I'm saying this is not gospel. I can't prove this. Don't write a book about it. Don't quote me. I'm just telling you a story, okay? Angela's been out there. I've been out there. We have indigenous tribes in Costa Rica. These were Native Americans that were here when Columbus landed. And those tribes, there's many of them that are still here, and you can go and they live on reservations, just like indigenous in the U.S. live on reservations. They do here as well. There are many Christians. Many have become Christians, but the majority of those that have become Christians have moved to the larger cities like Turrialba or San Jose. But the indigenous have certain privileges that other Costa Ricans do not have. They're allowed to learn their native language. Those are not taught in any other school. They're allowed to teach them in their schools. And they're also allowed to do things like bury their dead in their homes. That's not legal for anybody else, but it is legal for them because it was part of their culture. Well, many of them have hung on to an animistic, shamanistic culture. When you hear shaman, don't think the guy that's going to sell you ayahuasca and take you to a beach resort and let you have some experience over a fire. Now, that's bad, okay? But what we see out in the jungle among those shamans is even worse because it's real. These are people that truly worship the spirits that are in the forest. They reject Christ, and if a person will accept Christ, they'll go to that person, and the shaman will say, and I've talked to many people that have heard this, if you do not reject Christ, your child is going to get sick and die. And that's the threat. And so many of the indigenous struggle with their faith because they're always under constant attack by people like this, people that are possessed, people that worship demons, people that do not believe in Jesus. So it's a real thing. And my personal experience of being out there, I remember the first time I went out there, I was scheduled to speak at a gathering at a little rancho out in the middle of the jungle, walked for hours and hours to get there. And when I got to the little rancho, there were talisman hanging from every rafter. A talisman is something that represents one of their pagan gods. There were little eagles and little jaguars and little pigs and other little things, carvings. And these were meant to, I think they were meant to intimidate. They didn't intimidate me because I know the real God and he's bigger. He's more impressive. But there was such a spiritual deadness among the people that I talked to. It had an oppressive feel. You could really sense that there were evil forces there, and I believe it exists. So I don't need to convince you of that. Some people believe in demons, some don't. But as I read the scripture, it's clear this is a spiritual reality. It's going to vary in different parts of the world, but it is a spiritual reality. Now, pressing on, verse 6. When he saw Jesus, that's the impure spirit in the man that's wandering around the tombs. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." This automatically tells you this is not somebody that's got low blood sugar. Okay, this is not somebody that needs a Prozac. Okay, this is not somebody that just had too much Ritalin. This is somebody possessed by a demon who recognized God the Son in the flesh for who he was. How could a demon do that? Because demons live in this supernatural world. He had no doubt in his existence presented himself to the Son of God in heaven one day. He recognized him. He falls on his knees, which is a sign of inferiority to the superior, and he pleads with him that he wouldn't be destroyed. He says, "Don't torture me." He knows what he is capable of. So this right here, to me, is the clear-cut evidence. This isn't mental illness. This is recognition. And he uses the title, the main title, that non-Israelites would use for the Israelite God. Okay, this is not an affectionate title. This is a title of, "You are the supreme God." And that's how non-Israelites, Gentiles, would refer to the God of Israel. And that's how this guy, likely a Jew, referred to him. Why? Because he was possessed by a demon who's definitely not an Israelite. So there's a lot happening in this story. Verse 8, "For Jesus had said to him, 'Come out of this man, you impure spirit.' Then Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' 'My name is Legion,' he replied, 'for we are many.' And he begged Jesus again and again not to send him out of the area." Now, Jesus is asking these questions for the benefit of the disciples. Remember, a couple of things he's doing is he's authenticating that he's there with the real message and his ability to deliver somebody that everybody in the area knew about. This guy was infamous. This guy could break chains. This guy could not be subdued. This guy wandered around the tomb, so everybody knew who he was. So Jesus asked the demon, "Who are you?" He uses the word legion. A legion was a group of Roman soldiers, 6,000 strong. This means that there are thousands of demons inside this one man, habiting within him and making his life a living hell. Now, why does Jesus ask the name? Because he's about to do something. He's about to demonstrate something. Listen, if he just frees the man and casts the demons out, sends them to hell or whatever, and he doesn't do what he does next, then people just say, well, it was just all in his head. This is a guy that was just disturbed, emotionally disturbed, and he walked away, he's feeling better. You know, he had a good pep talk. You know, he went to one of those seminars where the guy gets you all amped up, thinking positive about your life, and then you go home, and a week later you're back in the dumps again. Something else is going on. So Jesus gets the guy to identify the fact that he is possessed. That's for the benefit of everybody else. Jesus knew it when he saw it. Now, notice what happens then. And go back to verse 10. He begged Jesus again and again not to send them, the demons, out of the area. Why? We don't know. We don't know. We don't know why they're partial. That's not answered in this question. They just wanted to stay geographically in that area. Perhaps it was because it was part of the Decapolis, which meant there were not a lot of Jews in this area, there were a lot of Gentiles in this area. Maybe they perceived, hey, the influence of the Messiah is going to be great in the area of the Jews. Maybe this is a better area for us. We don't know. That's all speculation. Verse 11, a large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them. Now, for whatever reason, they want to be put into something. Why did they say, send us into the pigs? Well, I think at this point, they're afraid of some eternal, as in permanent, confinement. They know what he is capable of. He can send them. Jude talks about Tartarus as permanent place where disobedient demons would be kept until the end. And maybe that was their fear. Maybe their fear was being annihilated. I don't know. We don't know. But they saw going into the pigs as a better alternative. But it actually works better for Jesus too. Watch what happens. Verse 13, he gave them permission, and the impure spirits came out and went into the pigs. Hang on, my thing just failed here. Went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank and into the lake and were drowned. First of all, let's deal with the fact that sometimes in the Bible, bad things happen to animals. Okay, this is not the first time. Think the 10 plagues on Egypt, a lot of animals involved, a lot of death. The sacrificial system, a lot of animals involved. I mean, just ad infinitum, animals being sacrificed. If you're going to take anything from this, you take from the fact that people are always worth more than animals, always. Now, I'm an animal lover. I'm not ashamed to admit that. I love my dog. I tolerate a cat, but I love my dog, and I love animals. But animals are not people. They're not people, and people have an exalted position. They're made in the image and likeness of God. Animals aren't. Any event, these animals are going to die, but that's not the important part of the story. The important part of the story is the people witnessed that what was in the man verbally bargained to be put in the pigs, 2,000 pigs, and then they destroyed the pigs. Whether the pigs suicided them, that's a joke. All right. Whether the pigs were driving themselves to escape the horror of the demons, or the demons were driving the pigs, it doesn't matter. Where demons go, destruction goes. That was the whole point. And now everybody saw it. Everybody in the crowd saw that Jesus had just delivered this man. And that's important for a couple reasons, right? It's good for the man. The man wasn't just out of his mind, he was demon possessed, and now he saw what happened. Next thing we're going to see, he's in his right mind. It's good for everybody to see because the miracle authenticates the messenger. It's also a good reminder that no matter what evil comes into a person's life, whether mental illness is genuine mental illness or demon possession, guess what? God can fix both. It is not hopeless. It is not helpless for anybody in your life that is suffering from these kinds of horrors. Jesus can fix it. Believe that. You say that today and people look at you, you're just naive. I say, no, you're just lacking faith. I know what my God can do. It's what he did for these men. Now this is the area in which it happened. You can see, and there are tombs, not in the photo here, but back about a mile from where this is, there are tombs. So he came out of the tombs towards the lake. Here's a hillside, and you can envision here over to the right, herds of pigs and this happening, and then running down the hill and drowning themselves. Verse 14, those tending the pigs ran off and reported this to the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Now, watch what happened. The disciples were afraid on the boat. Jesus calmed the storm, and then what? The disciples were afraid. Who is this man? Even the winds and the wave obey him. Right? Okay, now the crowd, they see the demon-possessed man. They're afraid of this man. Jesus heals them, and then what? They're afraid of Jesus. Power is terrifying. It is. When you meet real power, it's terrifying. You ever grabbed hold of a 220? That's terrifying. Okay, you ever grabbed hold of some good electricity? Power in people, it terrifies people until they trust the one with the power. Right? If it's a politician, if you like the politician, you trust him, you should give him more power. He's doing a great job. If you don't like the politician, he's got too much power. People have yet, this crowd and the disciples have yet to really trust Jesus. So his power terrifies them. So look what they do. Verse 16, those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. Now, the Bible doesn't say why exactly. It may have been, just the economic impact of this guy. We don't want him hanging around. We can't afford to lose any more pigs. Or it may have been something far more deeper, far more spiritual, that this guy is changing people. He's having a spiritual impact, and people are usually more comfortable in their sin than with the God who can deliver them from it. My sin I know. My sin I love. If Jesus hangs around too much, he's going to change my life. I'm not ready to change. I've heard this, people. I've heard this from many people. I want to believe in God, but I don't think I'm ready. What that means is I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what he'll do to me. And so the people asked Jesus to leave. Now the guy that had been delivered, verse 18, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell the people in the Decapolis, those 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. And the only curiosity here is that, in the past, Jesus had done miracles of this caliber, and he told the people to keep it to themselves. The main difference is he was in an area controlled by the Jews, and he knew that if his fame spread too quickly, that he'd be crucified too quick, and he's really at the beginning of his ministry. Now he's in the Decapolis. He's in a region that's Gentile controlled. He's going to come back here, And so having this guy be the first evangelist in the Decapolis is probably laying a foundation for future ministry in this region. Another thing is, these are Gentiles. A lot of them are Gentiles. There's Jews there as well, but there's not a lot of religious, observant Jewish leaders in that region that would seek to have him executed for his views. So it's not much of a danger of that getting ahead of him in that area. So Jesus, again, two things to take away from this. Miracles authenticate who he is. He's a God of power. But more than that, he's a God that can handle anything that you've got. And tonight we see his power over nature. We see his power over demons. Next week, we'll look at his power over the sick and his power over death. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much, Lord, for your word. Thank you for the power that we see in Jesus Christ. And Lord, I can talk about it all night. I just love to see the marvel at the things that he's done. Yeah, Lord, I'm convicted in my own life of the times when I let fear grab my heart instead of faith. May each of us, Lord, be quick to trust you with every situation, natural and supernatural, that comes along. Lord, so that we could walk through unafraid, knowing that you are in control of all things. For it's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.